There's a really remarkable design in the world that comes from math. I'm not a big math guy, but AI actually helped me this afternoon to figure it out. I need help for the math people. 1 plus 1 is 2. Okay. Let's do 1 plus 2. It's 3. All right. 2 plus 3 is? 5. Okay. 3 plus 5 is? 8. Okay. 5 plus 8 is? 8 plus 13 is? 13 plus 21 is? 34. 21 plus 34? 59. Is it? I'm going to lose it. Oh dear. What were the last two numbers? Is it 21, 34? 35. 55. 21, 34 is 55. 34, 55 is 89. 55 and 89. Can we stop now? Can please? Here. So you may have heard it. It's something called Fibonacci. It's just crazy. This pattern, it's in nature. If you take those numbers, you keep adding the last two numbers like that, it gives you something called Fibonacci. I mean, it's named after this guy, this Italian guy, who actually took it from the Indian mathematicians a long time ago. Over in India, they were figuring out how to make combinations of words. At least that's what Wikipedia says. I believe what Wikipedia says. But if you take those numbers and you draw a design using those numbers, you get this beautiful, the spiral thing, right? It's amazing. And when you start looking for it, you begin to see it a lot of places in nature, right? So if I were to zoom in to the smallest detail of that spiral, right? What's the smallest thing? What's the smallest picture I'm seeing there? Maybe like the smallest picture I'm seeing that snail or like the petals and the leaf, right? If you zoom in to the core, you're going to you kind of zoom in, like kind of like my Google zoom in on, it keeps going, right? It's amazing how detailed God is, right? If I zoom out and I keep going and zooming out, the bigger numbers, the biggest scope, you still see there's a hurricane and a picture of like a constellation, the same spiral shape built into this universe, right? It's amazing the wisdom of God. You may have known that already. Congratulations if you did. I heard the name before. I had to search it and find these pictures and things. But it's a simple reminder that there is amazing detail and complexity to God's creation. And the minor details and the great big macro picture. Our God is so wise and controlling. And that is the effect that God has when he comes now to Job in Job chapter 38. And really, we could take that hurricane image and really keep that in our minds, because God is going to be speaking to Job out of a whirlwind is the word for it. And we'll just explore that in a moment here. But we'll remind ourselves, kind of keeping ourselves up to speed. Your handout gives this information, but I want to have it on the screen in case someone's watching online later on. Those of you listening in on our conversation, you can follow along some of these ideas. Job has suffered a lot. And even though he was, by all appearances, a righteous person, now he's suffered a ton. His friends are seeing that, and they're trying to make sense of it. And so what they've done, they've challenged him because they're trying to figure why he has been suffering like this. What's their explanation for why he's suffering? Sin. Somewhere, suffering comes from sin. Job, you've suffered, therefore you have to be sinning somewhere. How does Job respond? Guys, no. Search history, all my texts. I have nothing to hide. Nothing. And you have a back and forth like this, 3 friends, 3 rounds. The last round doesn't bother responding because he's too fed up probably. And Job keeps answering them, and he's kind of stopped there talking back and forth. He's just convinced this is not wrong. Another younger friend has been listening in. His name is Elihu. And Elihu has an issue to raise with Job. He's not going to talk to Job about why he's suffering, the cause of it. He's concerned about something different, right? How are you responding to it, Job? If you're lamenting to God, that's very appropriate. The Psalms model this. But be careful, Job, because lament turns into complain, turns into attack. And Job, you're starting to sound like the wicked people who question God's integrity, God's righteousness. Job, if you say, at least I'm righteous, that's really dangerous territory to have that. So Elihu challenges Job there. That's at the end of chapter 37. Does Job answer Elihu? Does he say, no, Elihu, you're wrong again. Just like they're wrong, you're wrong. And actually, because you're wrong, I'm going to prove myself again. Actually, Job doesn't say anything at all. And you remember last week when we spent time looking at Elihu's response, he's using the pictures of storms a lot to show the power of God. Because here comes this looming storm in the distance. Now here it is. And so what we see now in chapter 38 is God himself speaking. The Lord answered Job. Did Job respond to Elihu? No. He's like probably just thinking, reflecting. Maybe he doesn't have a chance to respond because here's this wind blowing in, this windstorm. And I found myself thinking, what kind of windstorm would this be? Is this a hurricane? Well, they're probably not on the coast. They're further inland. Tornado of some kind? Or just a giant thunderstorm? There's a description of thunder and lightning in what Elihu says. So such intensity, gusts, and wind that God speaks out of this storm and he begins to speak. Now you're seeing chapter 38, verse 1. The Lord answered. This is Yahweh, the covenant name of God, personal name, speaking to Job directly. And he talks for a while. Let's go to see how long God talks.
The other three friends hearing this bit?
As far as we can tell, that's my guess.
We're all hearing it at the same time?
I would think so,
Okay.
yeah. Because I go to chapter 42, God talks to Job about the friends. We're not told for sure, but in my mind, it makes the most sense. They're all right there listening in.
Okay.
How long does God talk? Chapter 38, God begins to speak. Chapter 39, verse 1, God is still talking. I'm looking at chapter 40, verse 1. God gives a second round to Job. We're not going to get to chapter 40 tonight. But Job does answer him just briefly in chapter 40, verse 3, and I just want to appreciate this. Chapter 40, verse 5, Job's response, once I have spoken, but I will not answer. You've asked me to respond. I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to speak back to God. Didn't talk back to Elihu. I'm definitely not going to talk back to God. And yet, when I come back to chapter 38, verse 1, that's what God's actually going to challenge Job to do. We'll spend a little more time in the first few verses here of chapter 38 because God is challenging Job's words. Verse 2, God asks a question. What's the question that he asks in chapter 38, verse 2? Who? So I'm back in Job chapter 38, verse 2. Who is the question? Who is the one who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Here's this great counsel of God. Job, you're not shedding light on the situation. In fact, you're darkening it. You're making it worse. Why? Because what is Job doing? He's speaking words without knowledge. And you may remember that knowledge idea was a big theme in Elihu. Elihu's saying, Job, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you don't know. Why are you talking so strongly and dogmatically? You're actually fighting back against God. So God's going to challenge Job. Who is speaking like this? Not Elihu, because now he's answering Job, right? Again, whirlwind, overwhelming a sense of the presence of God. Verse 3, what does God say? Gird up now thy loins like a man. I will demand of thee. And what is he supposed to do? You answer me. Yeah, if you can, right? Prepare yourself, Job. You're so smart. You're wanting to accuse me and you're undermining who I am. You're asking me questions. My turn. I'm going to ask you a few questions. And let's see if you can answer me. And what we'll find is as God is questioning Job constantly, he's really going to challenge Job's questions, Job's assumptions. Job thinks he has it figured out. He's got a case against God. And God's going to tell him, listen, you have no idea how this universe works. Let me just ask question after question after question. And that's what we'll enjoy working our way through here for the next few minutes, reading through chapters 38 and 39. First of all, he's going to focus Job on the earth, starting in verse 4. And we'll read sections at a time. We'll try to sense, okay, what is God asking about? Starting in verse 4 through verse 7. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare, if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together, all the sons of God shouted for joy. What are the questions that God is asking? Very hard ones.
The first one you might be able to actually answer. Where was that when he laid the foundations of the earth?
Yeah.
You would have been probably the dust of the ground.
Yeah, I was in the dust. I was nothing. Right? So you see where questions? Where were you? If you know.
Andrew,
Yeah.
does that 38:7 mean that the angels were created before the earth?
So that's one idea we could have. Sons of God, probably angels. We know they're created, and God created the heavens and the earth in that 6-day week. So it's possible he started with them. Or light, when he says, let there be light, maybe angels are part of that light. Or maybe earth and sky, maybe. But then we know at this, when you get to day 3 and the earth's being formed, they're singing. So they show up sometime before day 3. And that's the most we can say, from Scripture. No, that's a good point, though. Yeah, so sons of God, verse 7, this is referring to the angels. I go back to chapter 1. Satan is among the sons of God, this group of angels who are appearing before God. He's asking questions about how the earth is formed, that first joyous moment of creation, right? You see where, who? Yeah. Who did this, Job? Hint, not you.
Number 6 becomes John.
Yeah. Where are the foundations of the earth? Who laid the cornerstone? Oh, I know that one. That was God again. Okay. Job's passing the test. I'm going to read now verses 8 through 11. Who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth as if it had issued out of the womb? When I made the cloud the garment thereof, the thick darkness a swaddling band for it. Break up for it my decreed place, set bars and doors, and said, hitherto shalt thou come, but no further, and here shall thy proud waves be stayed. What's the question in verse 8? What's the question word? The word who. Who did this, Job? Who did this? Here's the picture of the sea when it's first being formed. The sea covers the whole earth, but all of a sudden it rises up and there's this boundary to the sea. When it's limited, and it's almost describing the sea like this screaming infant. Come here, buddy. Let's just wrap you up. Here. Calm down. The ocean is like this little infant as God describes him. And he says, you cannot go past this point. You cannot run over these beaches. This is your boundary. God's describing the emerging of earth and the scaling back of the seas, declaring where their boundary is. Who could do that? Job? No. Let's read 12 through 15. Hast thou commanded the morning since thy days? Or like all of your life, have you ever controlled the morning and caused the dayspring to know its place, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth, that the wicked might be shaken out of it? It's turned as clay to the seal. They stand as a garment. And from the wicked their light is withholden, and the high arm shall be broken. Have you done this, Job? Is verse 12. What's he describing here? The morning. Imagine morning light. It shoots out over the horizon, extends to the ends of the earth, exposes all the wicked like little roaches. They scurry away. But here's the world being exposed to the light. Clay pressed down on the seal, under a seal. Here's light just swarming over the earth. No one can avoid it or skip it. So, Job, have you controlled the dawn? Job, have you ever determined how dawn works? Have you ever made it be daytime, Job? Let's keep reading. Verse 16. Hast thou entered into the springs of the sea? Hast thou walked the search of the depth? Have you walked the bottom of the ocean, Job? Have the gates of death been opened to thee? Hast thou seen the doors of the shadow of death? Hast thou perceived the breadth of the earth? Declare, if thou knowest it all, Mr. Know-it-all. Have you ever walked the bottom of the ocean, Job? Have you seen the entrance to death? Do you know how big the earth is, Job? Again, Job's like, no, actually, I haven't done that. 19 through 21. Where is the question? Where is the way where light dwelleth? As for darkness, where is the place thereof? What's the boundary between light and dark? That thou shouldest take it to the bound thereof, thou shouldest know the paths of the house thereof. In my Bible, I've circled verse 21. It's a good summary verse, besides verse 3. Knowest thou it, because thou wast then born? Because the number of thy days is great? Job, do you claim to be born before the light? Do you know light from darkness? Are you older than light? No one's older than light, right, Hannah? That doesn't make any sense. How could Job be older than light? And that's the point. God is asking these obvious questions, and he's kind of stunned. 22 through 24. Hast thou entered the treasures of the snow? Hast thou seen the treasures of the hail, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, the day of battle and war? By what way is the light parted, which scattereth the east wind upon the earth? Job, do you know where I store all my ammo of hail when it's needed, when there's a battle? Job, can you control the treasures of the snow? Again, he's just asking questions after questions, stunning Job with these scenarios, the reserves of storm and hail. What about other weather, verses 25 through 30? Who is the question now? Who hath divided a water course, the overflowing of waters, or a way for the lightning of thunder, to cause it to rain on the earth where no man is, on the wilderness wherein there's no man? Who sends the rain on the desert, Job? To satisfy the desolate waste ground, cause the bud of the tender herb to spring forth? Hath the rain a father? Who has begotten? Who's given birth to dew? Out of whose womb came the ice, the hoary frost of heaven, who hath engendered it? The waters are hid as with a stone, the face of the deep is frozen. Who sends out the rain, Job? Job's like, okay, well, maybe I don't understand these glories of this rain and how it descends, whether it's the wilderness without people or, verse 30, the ice glaciers that are as hard as rock. If that's not hard enough, God goes on, verses 31 to 33. Let's talk about space. Canst thou bind the sweet influences? Now he's going to name constellations, right? Pleiades, the bands of Orion. Canst thou bring forth, and the King James says Mazaroth. The Hebrew is the idea of constellations. Over in another marginal reading of the original King James, they just said maybe 12 signs. Can you bring forth the 12 signs at the right time? Can you order the constellations, Job? Canst thou guide Arcturus? This is a star in that hemisphere with his sons, perhaps a reference to, we call it the one constellation Virgo. It's like a whole cluster of stars that follow each other. Job, can you control the stars in distant space? Can you lead it out? Verse 32, Arcturus, maybe also a reference to a bear constellation named the bear. And here's verse 33, the same word, no. Knowest thou the ordinances of heaven? Canst thou set the dominion thereof in the earth? Job, do you know how heaven is set up? 34 and 35. Canst thou lift up thy voice to the clouds, that abundance of waters may cover thee? Canst thou send lightnings, that they may go and say to thee, here we are? Job, can you control storms? I've circled verse 36 as well as a key verse for this chapter. Here is another who question. Who has put wisdom in the inward parts? Who has given understanding to the heart? Who can make a brain think, Job? No one can. The last two verses of the section, who can number the clouds in wisdom? Who can stay or limit or control the bottles of heaven when the dust groweth into hardness, the clouds cleave fast together? Job, do you know how clouds form? So God is just going on and on to Job. Whew, that's a lot. Can you control weather? Were you there when the earth was founded? And if we're science people, we're fascinated by these details of how this all works in cosmology and the weather. But then he just goes to, do you know how the brain works, Job? That's a lot of information for Job to hear out of a thunderstorm. Right? And we'll just pause and we'll say perhaps the emphasis at this point is God showing Job, look how powerful I am. Right? See my power on display. What he's going to do next is switch and not looking at the earth. Now, verse 39, who does he talk about? A lion. God now begins talking about animals. For this 3 verses and the rest of chapter 39, let's appreciate the animals that God describes. And here you're going to see some animals that focus on God's power. No one can control this animal. But also you'll see God's concern, his attention to detail. He's zooming in that Fibonacci sequence, the smallest detail of the spiral. Verses 39 to 41, we read about lions. Wilt thou hunt the prey for the lion, or fill the appetite of the young lions when they couch in their dens, abide in the covert to lie and wait? Who provideth for the raven his food when his young ones cry to God? They wander for lack of meat. Job, can you feed not just lions, but their young? Job, who takes care of the young ravens who are hungry? God helps the ravens find their food. What a personal detail. God takes care of baby ravens. Not only that, let's continue in chapter 39, verses 1 through 4. Here's a word for knowing. Another emphasis. Job, do you know? Knowest thou the time when the wild goats of the rock bring forth? Canst thou mark when the hinds or deer calve when they give birth? Can you number the months that they fulfill? Knowest thou, do you know the time when they bring forth? They bow themselves, bring forth their young ones, they cast out their sorrows. The young ones in good liking, they grow up with corn, they go forth, return not to them. Job, do you know when the deer give birth? And I love this. God has been talking about planets. And now he says, do you know where the deers are hiding when they give birth? And the mother's just by herself, and she's kind of going through that pressure of the labor pains, and then here's this little fawn. Here's God, how big and how personal and intimately acquainted he is. He knows everything, right? Isn't it just glorious to see our God knowing these little details? Verses 5 through 8. Let's see an example of an animal that's uncontrollable. Who sent out the wild ass, this donkey free? Who's loosed the bands of the wild ass? Whose house I have made, the wilderness, the barren land, his dwellings. He scorneth the multitude of the city, neither regardeth he the crying of the driver. The range of the mountains is his pasture. He searcheth after every green thing. Can anyone tame a wild donkey? Did you send him out, Job? Did you make him free to wander? No. What about verses 9 through 12? You may see the word unicorn in the King James. The idea is a wild ox. So 1600s, their word for unicorn could mean like a wild ox, right? They didn't have pictures of, today a unicorn thinks like rainbows and charms and a different perception of it. But there, this is the idea, this wild, untamed beast. Will the unicorn be willing to serve thee or abide by thy crib? Canst thou bind the unicorn with his band, like a rope? Can you tie up a wild bull? Have fun with that one. In the furrow and this farm land, will he harrow the valleys after thee? Are you really going to tame and control a wild animal, wild ox with a rope? Okay, go ahead, plow my field for me. Good luck with that. Wilt thou trust him because his strength is great? Wilt thou leave thy labor to him? Wilt thou believe him that he will bring home thy seed, gather it in thy barn? Of course not, he's wild. No one can control this wild animal. Verses 13 through 18. What animal is here? What do you see? Birds. Specifically, end of verse 13, an ostrich. God's going to show off his knowledge about an ostrich. And he may be poking at Job a little bit here. Gavest thou the goodly wings to the peacocks, wings and feathers to the ostrich? Let's describe the ostrich. Which leaveth her eggs in the earth, warmeth them in dust, forgetteth that the foot may crush them, or the wild beast may break them. She's hardened against her young ones as though they were not hers. Her labor is in vain without fear. He makes this type of bird, well, I'll describe it after I finish reading through verse 18, I'm sorry. Because God hath deprived her of wisdom, neither hath he imparted to her understanding. What time she lifteth up herself on high, she scorneth the horse and his rider. Here's an ostrich. God has designed this bird not to look very smart, right? Majestic and dumb. How is she dumb? How does he describe how she treats her eggs? Careless. Buries them right there in the dirt and could walk on them without even knowing it or thinking about it. She doesn't naturally hatch her young with body heat. The sand keeps them warm. Gives birth and just walks away. Majestic, and yet at the same time, when she starts running, she lifts herself up, she's faster than a horse. Look how amazing this creature is, and God gave her limited understanding. Job, someone who says he has all knowledge but actually has very limited understanding. I give people insights, Job. I designed this creature not smart on purpose, Job. Verse 19 through verse 25 describes a different animal now. Who? What animal do we see? A horse, a powerful war horse. Job, hast thou given the horse strength? Hast thou clothed his neck with thunder? Canst thou make him afraid as a grasshopper? The glory of his nostrils is terrible. Can you really scare a war horse, Job? Don't think so. He paweth in the valley, rejoiceth in his strength. He goeth on to meet the armed men. He mocketh at fear, is not affrighted. Neither turneth he back from the sword. The quiver rattleth against him, the glittering spear and the shield. He swalloweth the ground with fierceness and rage. Neither believeth he that it's the sound of the trumpet. He saith among the trumpets, Ha! He laughs in battle. He smelleth the battle afar off, the thunder of the captains and the shouting. Here's a war horse, doesn't know fear at all. Powerful, confident, not intimidated. Job, did you design him like that? That powerful? No. One more, verses 26 to 30. Now let's talk about birds, but let's talk about specific types of birds. Not little baby ravens, not foolish ostriches. Let's talk about majestic and high isolated hawks or eagles. Doth the hawk fly by thy wisdom, stretch her wings toward the south? Doth the eagle mount up at thy command and make her nest on high? She dwelleth and abideth on the rock, upon the crag of the rock, the strong place. From there, from that high nest, she seeketh the prey. Her eyes behold afar off. Her young ones also suck up blood. Where the slain are, there is she. Right? She's a scavenger, describing this hawk of sorts. Here's the eagle, way high up on her nest, where no human could reach. From there, she can look down, and God designed the eye of the eagle to be able to see the smallest rodent from far away. Swoops down, grabs it, brings up, feeds her young at the top. God sees baby ravens, baby deer, little baby eaglets, these little carnivores who are chirping for meat, fresh food, breakfast. Right? End of chapter. Wow. What is the effect that has on us, reading all of those questions? He's been busy.
Awesome.
God is busy. He's awesome. Right?
I like the fact that there's lots of questions. Like when Jesus walked there, he answered questions with questions.
Yeah.
Where it could be this, and he just
Yeah.
right off the bat, it's like the same, right?
Yeah, and that just stuck out to me, man. You have all these questions, right? I just did a quick estimate. I counted 47 question marks in one of my Bibles. I just counted really quickly. Question after question. Does it give Job a chance to answer? No, Job's just stunned, probably learning things he had never known. Right? And I appreciate God just asking them, what's the impact this has on him? We can tell because let's go over to chapter 40, verse 4. We've already read it. Actually, verse 5, excuse me. Let's start with chapter 40, verse 4. Job's response, I'm vile. What shall I answer thee? I'll lay my hand upon my mouth. I better not answer you. You told me to answer you, but I've actually learned my lesson. I'm not going to try to answer back to God. So one impact of questions is silence. And sometimes the best thing I can say is nothing. Right? And here's Job with his friends trying to defend himself, well-intentioned. Elihu realizes this is starting to smell a little off, Job, cautions him, and Job wisely doesn't reply to, maybe doesn't have a chance to reply to Elihu. sees God's glory, hears of God's glory in these questions, I better not say anything at all. In light of the glory and the grandeur of God, sometimes our best response is silence. Now, it doesn't mean, put up and shut up and stop asking questions, but it does mean, especially when my talking is starting to become complaining and it's starting to turn an unhealthy flavor, right? Where I'm not honoring God. You're God, I'm not. That may be part of this idea. Silence. Another big impact that struck me is just humility, right? God is asking all these questions. Do you know? Can you do this? Who did this, Job? And we just want to put it in our perspective, right? Just our region, where we are. Do you know where the ivy's growing right now? Do you know how many, the before after of the next 2 days around us? Here's God monitoring the growth of every plant all around us. Do you know how the traffic patterns work in this region? God's got the ultimate helicopter view. Just seeing, I've often think, what does my car look like from really high up in the air? Here's God seeing this all. Do you know how our bodies function right now? Do we know the crises that God sees coming and is allowing to come to us over the next week or the next month, the next year? Our God sees it all. Does he know the temptations? Do we know the temptations we're going to face this next week? Where our flesh could really easily kick in. We don't know, we can't see the future, but here's our God who's just above us. And so it helps us maintain a sense of humility and awe and reverence, right? And then that brings us to the big lessons I'm learning is just the idea of comparing people to God, right? Job, where were you? And I want us to think about this in the two broad ways you may have caught these themes along, the limits in power. God asks Job this question. Have you done this? Can you do this? Now that's a really easy question to answer, right, Dave? Can you? No. Only God can. Of course, only God can, right? And that's just a good reminder for us, right? Can I keep my brain functioning? No. Can I wake myself up tomorrow morning? No. Only God can. And so there's a sense in just realizing how limited we are. It helps us realize maybe I should not feel like I have to advise God on how he should rule the universe. I can't control it. I'm not capable of controlling an animal in front of me, right? And so that may be one big idea, right? I am limited. What's the word for God's unlimited power? It's a fancy term. Omnipotent, right? All powerful. All capable. There's nothing that limits the power of God. And then the same idea we've talked about, limits in knowledge. He's asked two sets of questions. The one is, can you? Well, obviously no. But this is Job. Do you know who? Who is another big question. You can circle all the who's and really see how much it stands out along the way. Do you know who does this? That's also an easy question to answer. Yes, I do know who. Again, only God knows all these things, right? Here's Job, words without knowledge, just flapping his jaws, but not revealing truth or wisdom or knowledge. And yet here's God asking him in chapter 38, verse 36, who has put wisdom in the inward parts? Who gives understanding, Job? Or chapter 39, I limit the understanding of the ostrich, Job. I give you as much information as you're supposed to know. And that's all you need to know. And again, that's the effect for us. Let me suggest we turn very quickly to two other verses, and if you can go to Isaiah chapter 40 with me. Isaiah chapter 40, and the end of this chapter can be very meaningful for us. Yeah, Isaiah chapter 40, because this is this is a turning point in the book of Isaiah. Instead of confronting his people about their sin and predicting the punishment to come to them and the other nations around them, he switches from confronting them to chapter 40, verse 1. He says, comfort Comfort my people. What is some of the comfort that God gives? I'm going to go down to chapter 40, verse 27. I'm in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 27. God asks another question of his people. In chapter 40, verse 27, God asks them a different question. What's the question that he asks them? Not who, why? O my people, why sayest thou, O Jacob, and speakest, O Israel? God's people have been complaining to him. Why do you say this? My way is hid from the Lord. My life is hidden from God. He doesn't see me. My judgment is passed over from my God. God's judgment missed me. You who I'm down here, that's what God's people would be tempted to say. You missed me. Why would you ask that? Verse 27. Hast thou not known? Don't you know? Haven't you heard? Here's what you should know, my people. You don't need to know the Fibonacci sequence, but you do need to know this, verse 28. The everlasting God, the Lord, that's Yahweh, this covenant personal God, the creator of the ends of the earth, he fainteth not. He is neither weary, no searching of his understanding. You need to know one thing. God knows everything. That's what you need to know. And not only that, but look how he stoops to the young ones, right? Where these little birds, little fawns, just having been given birth, and we're just kind of struggling to walk around. Look at how he treats the weak and the limited. Verse 29, he giveth power to the faint. To them that have no might, he increases strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary. Young men shall utterly fall. Oh, here's what I need to do. They that wait upon the Lord, they get the power, the strength that they need. Their strength will be renewed. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. This is such a fitting kind of PS to the end of Job chapter 38. I need to know one thing. God knows everything. That's what I need to know. And if I'm limited in my strength, I look to him, and he renews my strength day by day, because my way is not hidden from him. He knows. He knows. If he knows how baby eagles get their breakfast, he knows us, his own chosen people. Let's pray together. Lord Jesus, thank you that you do know. Oh, you're so aware of us, the hairs of our head. You know the questions that we're grappling with. You know the prayers that could easily warp into complaining, questioning, even accusing. But we don't want to be like that. Oh, Lord, we want to be like Job. And when our praying, our venting turns sinful, oh, Lord, help us to be still, to be silent, humble ourselves, and be reminded of your glorious power, your infinite knowledge. There is no searching of your understanding. Thank you that you know. Thank you that you will do. Thank you that we can trust you as your people. And so this week, please keep us strong in our faith. Help us to recognize your glory even in nature around us, animals invisible to our eyes but known to you. Thank you that you see, and that because you see, you will empower us to please you this week. And so please be pleased through us this week. Help us to honor you and love you. In Jesus' name, amen.